All right, everybody. It is Izzy once again back today with another Q&A. So let's go ahead and get into the first question here, which is about how to put in gym pin extensions. How do you weight gym extensions? Gym pin, on the end cap. Well, man, California just gets really old. All that sunshine just really wears you down. So I decided to trade it in for blizzards and a Dunkin' Donuts on every corner. Does a CPAP improve snoring? Literally, it forces you to not be able to snore, because what a CPAP stands for is continuous positive airway pressure. So it blows air continuously through your nose and or mouth, depending on what kind of CPAP mask you have, and forcibly keeps those airways open. So when you snore, it's like those airways are collapsing for a second, and that's what makes that kind of noise. Excuse the sound effect there, but yeah. So a CPAP absolutely will fix snoring. Now, if you don't actually have sleep apnea and you're just snoring, a CPAP is a pretty extreme fix for snoring. You might want to look into like an orthodontic mouthpiece or something else first, because it's not necessary unless you have sleep apnea. What is functional bodybuilding? I think that is the same thing as when people who sell bottled water label it as organic, keto-friendly, gluten-free, non-GMO H2O. In other words, it's a bunch of marketing soup BS. Any sort of hypertrophy is going to be functional. You just have to go and do the activity that you want increased function. So, lift weights, then play basketball. I've once had a 300-pound doctor tell me that I needed to consider a diet and exercise program to lose weight because I was obese by BMI. Keep in mind, at the time I was like bodybuilding. I'll put a picture up, and I had like a six-pack, veins in my arms, everything. And to have this 300-pound guy be like, and just completely dead-faced. Yeah, you really should consider getting on a diet and exercise program. It's like, okay, well, maybe you should too. What are the benefits, if any, to using cuffs on cable laterals as opposed to D-handles? The benefits of using cuffs on really any cable exercise is that gripping can aggravate elbow tendonitis. And when you use a cuff, you completely remove grip as the factor, and it allows for a little bit more natural alignment at the wrist, depending on what exercise that you're doing. So for those of you who suffer from golfer's elbow or tennis elbow, and you have certain cable exercises or laterals or whatever that aggravate that injury, a cable cuff is one solution that you can give a try, and in my experience, it will generally completely eliminate that pain for the majority of people. It certainly does for me on these single arm or adult flies. It works on cross-body tricep extensions, and definitely works on cable laterals for me as well. I'm going to assume that you're talking about powerlifting, and I think this kind of gets into the nature of why I don't really consider people who don't compete as real powerlifters. Training at home for strength is one thing, but the whole point of a powerlifting program is to increase your maxes under standardized competition conditions. Now, you can sort of recreate this at home, and that's fine, but to really properly evaluate your process and whether or not things are working, you would, in my opinion, need to be peaking and maxing out a lot more often than once every 3 years. Now, if you're just a hobbyist, sure, yeah, do whatever you want, do whatever is most fun, for sure. But I think for best results, you should definitely be peaking and competing way more often than once every 3 years. Maybe like 3 times a year, to be real. I think it just simply gave me an emotional and visceral understanding that hard work pays off. A lot of people hear that growing up, but for them, it's just a cliche or a platitude, and it's not something they really take seriously. It's kind of just like another thing that people say, like, look before you leap, or be patient. But for me, it was something that I saw firsthand, that with sustained effort and a long-term plan that I actually stuck to, I was in complete control of my own destiny with regards to pretty much any area of my life. Recently, I heard a statistic that only 2% of American males have six-pack abs, compared to about 10 to 11% who are millionaires. So if you can use sustained effort and long-range planning to achieve something that almost no American has in terms of your physical body, you can do the same thing in your relationships, in your finances, and any other area of life that you actually care about. So for me, it was just an affirmation that if I worked hard and smart for long enough, I can get whatever I want out of life. Well, the reason why I always start my flies from the top is so that every rep is the same, because every other rep starts from there. And I don't think I should really be mixing it up. You know what I mean? Like, should some of my sets start from the bottom? Should some of them start halfway through a rep? You want to do it the same way every time. So because every other rep after the first one is going to have an eccentric and then a stretch shortening cycle, that's why I do my first one from the middle, as you said, or the top as well. I don't normally like when people put two completely separate questions in the question box, but we have extra time here, so what do elbow sleeves really do? Mine don't do anything. I can literally pull those over my arm with one hand. It literally just makes my elbows warm and sweaty, which keeps that joint lubricated and reduces perception of pain. They add no carryover whatsoever. Which cuffs do you use? Excuse me. I use just the cheapest pair I could find on Amazon. I mean, it's literally just like a Velcro product with a little ring in it. Just get the cheapest thing that you can. I paid like $10 for mine. I truly don't think you're going to be best served by getting a more expensive product, but I mean, if that's what you want to do, go for it. I just found the cheapest thing I could on Amazon. As for how often do I hip hinge and how many variations do I use per training cycle, I hip hinge once every microcycle, which for me is every 8 to 10 days. At my strongest, I was only doing a hip hinge once every 10 days. Currently, I do it once every 8 days. And because I'm only doing it once, I only use one hip hinge variation. I always deadlift as my hip hinge variation. I never do good mornings. Deadlifts are much harder to recover from, so there's no way I could fit 2 hip hinges into the same microcycle. Right now it's conventional. In the past it's been RDL, but it's a deadlift usually. Would you ever consider mixing training to failure and RIR on the same movement for a client? For example, doing the first set to failure and the second set to 2 RIR. So probably not that exact example, but yes, I mean, I do somewhat mix them. And the circumstances where that would be the case would basically be the following, where 1 set to failure is not enough stimulus to keep generating progress, and 2 sets to failure seems to be causing recovery issues. So they're regressing off of 2 sets and 1 set's not enough. So then you need something in between. And in that situation, what I would usually do is maybe 2 sets at 1 RIR or 2 sets at 2 RIR instead. Some exercises such as wrist extensions and hanging leg raises are difficult to progress every single week. Should I rotate them? I would not recommend rotating exercises like that so that you're only doing it once every 2 weeks. That's just suboptimal frequency to make progress. Just use a different progression model. I assume you mean that you can't microload these movements for whatever reason, so you can't go up 1%. So you can use double progression across multiple sets. You should still be able to add like 1 rep to 1 of 3 or 4 sets. If all else fails, bump up the rep range to 15 to 30. It's easier to add reps there. Do powerlifters need to include submaximal singles in the off season? If you are a novice to intermediate level powerlifter, there's like a 95% chance that the primary goal of your off season is additional hypertrophy. So if you are doing submaximal competition singles, that is going to significantly take away from the amount of hypertrophy work that you can do, because singles generate a lot of fatigue and not a lot of hypertrophy stimulus. So I would recommend, when you're deep in off season, to do away with any sort of competition submaximal singles, like a single at 8 or something like that. So focus on extended range of motion SPD movements. When using RTS style load drop programming, should you have set defined rest periods? So again, first of all, I don't work for RTS. I'm not an RTS representative. You shouldn't be asking me how they run their programming these days. But from what I remember back in the day, they used to have specific total time allotments per exercise. So for example, you got 30 minutes per exercise, and then you could divide the rest based on auto-regulation. As far as I know, they no longer use intra-workout fatigue-based load drops and things of that nature anyway. It's fixed volume now. Does it matter which direction you face when using the assisted pull-up machine at your gym? A little bit, yes. So the foot bar that I'm going on here, it does not move straight up and down. If you look real closely, it moves in an arc. So when you face the direction that I am, it pushes you up and back. If you face the other direction, it pushes you up and forward, which to me is a little bit weird. Secondly, and this could be a plus or negative depending on what you're trying to do, the neutral grip pull-up handlebars will block you from going any higher than, to shoulder height when you're doing it the direction that I'm facing. If you face the other direction, you can actually pull yourself higher. You can probably pull yourself to like the top of your abs if you really want to. So pluses and minuses, just depends on what you want. I got a good deal on a cambered Swiss bar without knurling. Is the knurling a must for bodybuilding? Knurling isn't a must in my opinion. Most pressing isn't even generally grip limited, and your hands aren't going to slip that much depending on what the bar surface actually is. And you can always use a lot of chalk. So I would go ahead and scoop up that good deal while it's available. What is the hamstring doing differently to flex the knee versus when it is extending the hip? So this question is basically getting at the fact that I have on many occasions said that the hamstrings are, in general, better knee flexors than they are hip extensors. And the actual answer to this question is pretty high level physiology that's well beyond my ability to sort of like talk at you real fast. It's something that should be looked up from scholarly sources directly. But the long and short of it is that the hamstrings are actually 4 unique different muscles that have different architectures, and they are better suited to produce force in different joint alignments. And for the majority of the hamstring muscles, their ability to produce peak forces is actually greatest in knee flexion exercises and not hip extension ones. All right, everybody, that is it for today's Q&A. As always, if you liked the video, please like the video. If you have any questions for me, just leave them in the comments below. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share if you think it's worth sharing. And as always, of course, most importantly, have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.